one of the most important things that companies need to reflect upon is to recognise that there is more than one style of effective leadership. I think most organisations now are fully aware of the fact that women's voices need to be included around the boardroom table, and that women have a particular and distinctive contribution to add to discussions. They come at things from a different angle. They can often, partly because they haven't been round boardroom tables for anything like as long as their male peers, so they can often ask those seemingly very simple and sometimes seemingly naive questions that occasionally get right to the heart of the matter. So most companies now, all over Europe, recognise that they need to have women's voices more included. What I think organisations are still struggling to enact, if you like, is understanding how their cultures need to change if women's contribution is going to be most fully represented. Because, not surprisingly, cultures in organisations that have for generations been led and directed by men are used to operating in a particular way. They're used to certain patterns of behaviour, they're used to certain modes of operation, and in many companies, leadership has the characteristics of male leadership. I think what's particularly interesting at the moment is that organisations are beginning to realise that leadership can also have many different faces and can be conducted in different ways. And I think that cultural change is one of the most important messages for organisations at the moment. There's a whole basket of things that women can do. First of all, I think they have to decide to engage, to actually get in and engage, and to tackle career development and career planning in a reasonably systematic way. That doesn't mean having a rigid time frame. I'm going to spend 2 years doing this, 2 years doing that, and then I'm going to go and run the Hong Kong office. No, not like that. But to have some sort of a plan, because one of the things that in the last 13 years of being an executive coach, one of the things that I have discovered is that fewer women than men, fewer, not all, but fewer women than men, plan their careers, even in a loose way, to have some aspirational goals, not as a rigid straitjacket, but as a roadmap for them to follow. And I think women would progress further and faster if they thought slightly more systematically about what they were doing in their professional lives. But my experience in the UK, at least, is that most blue chip organisations now are fully aware of the need to think more flexibly and to offer all their workforce, men as well as women, greater leeway in how they conduct their professional lives, so greater flexibility. Generation Y is not going to be willing to operate in the same way as their parents or their grandparents. The world of work is indeed changing. A book that's coming out in June 2011, Palgrave Macmillan are publishing it, and it's called Women and the New Business Leadership. And it's an interesting book, I would say that, of course, but it is an interesting book because essentially what I've done is to reflect upon what changes would be needed in leadership post the 2007 and 8 economic and financial crisis. I've thought about the behaviours that led to that crisis, as well as the failings in regulation and systems and processes. And what we've done in this particular book is to bring together both a thought about the systems and processes and frameworks and regulation, and a thought about the human behaviours that may need to be adjusted if we're going to avoid some of the characteristics that Sir David Walker, in his report on what happened in the crisis, identified as being contributors to that crisis: groupthink, passive free riding, denial, projection. These are essentially psychological concepts that have to do with the way people think and the way people behave around the boardroom table. And what Sir David's report did, very interestingly, in Annex 4, was to point up the importance of these behavioural aspects as being just as important as the procedural and regulatory changes that will need to be put in place. So the book takes a look at this concept of behavioural change to avoid crisis in the future, and considers what part women can play in helping boards adjust their behaviours and bringing women's own particular gift to bear upon what happens in boardroom meetings. Well, I've been here today at Jump's 5th anniversary event here in Brussels, and it's been my first event. And I have been hugely impressed by the professionalism, the vibrancy, the energy, the different voices, the multinational nature of the audience. It's a fantastic construct. So my advice would be to keep on doing what Jump are doing. They're filling a real niche there.